Overall, when I look at the growing percentage of Democratic voters who have turned their backs on Biden, I don't blame them. And in fact, I'm definitely one of them. That doesn't mean I support Trump, but I would never cast a ballot for Joe Biden.
I feel just as you do that, like, even if he did a 180 now today, it's too late.
I don't really know how you convince people who think, well, Biden's is just genocide light. You're just grandstanding to, I guess, an audience that thinks it's principled to not vote. Problem is I don't think a lot of these people understand how much worse what's happening in Gaza could be compared to what it's happening now. Anna Kasparian, Krystal and Kyle Kulinski all agree that there is no way they're voting for Biden after his support for Israel's genocide. Okay.
Overall, when I look at the growing percentage of Democratic voters who have turned their backs on Biden, I don't blame them. And in fact, I'm definitely one of them.
So, Anna, have you decided you're not voting for him in the fall, or what do you think? How are you thinking about that?
I will not vote for Joe Biden under any circumstance, even if he were to end the war right now. I think what he has demonstrated over the last 6 months has been absolutely deplorable, unacceptable, and I could never.
Even if he could end the war tomorrow.
Support it. That doesn't mean I support Trump, but I would never cast a ballot for Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much in the same place. And it's Kyle actually in a private conversation said they basically have us checkmated, because I think still even now, like when election night comes, it's not like if Trump were to win, like I would find that horrifying.
Yeah.
And I do think, especially
for Palestine, not least of all, right? Because I know the problem is, and I already know where this is going, so I'm just going to say it. If you believe, and if you reported on Israel and Palestine the way that Krystal and Kyle and TYT have for the last 6 months, you would think the difference between Biden and Trump is Hitler and Hitler light. And I don't know if I would vote for Hitler light. So it makes sense. It's like it's a logical conclusion of what they're pushing. But I don't think these guys just don't understand. I feel like, especially when I see, I know Jank's not here, but if it's on TYT or the way Kyle and all them talk about it, the difference between, the problem is that when you use the word genocide again, like, and that's your starting point, it's that you can't really get higher than genocide. It doesn't get worse than genocide. But the problem is I don't think a lot of these people understand how much worse what's happening in Gaza could be compared to what it's happening now. Like if Israel actually had the intent to go out and exterminate the people of Gaza and the West Bank, or even just Gaza, like with the abilities that they have, because I think actually when it comes to legal precedent, the way that you act in proportion to the capacity that you have is taken into account. That has been it's been a metric that's been, or like a parameter that is actually considered when they're doing genocide cases in the ICJ. So when you look at Israel's capacity, like there are 1.5 million people in Rafah right now. Israel could take them all out in like 48 hours if they wanted to. They could just go there and sweep the entire place. And obviously people like I know Jank says this, I don't know if the other three say this, they would say that Israel's not doing that, and they're actually sometimes aborting strikes and sometimes opening corridors and sometimes allowing aid in. And now I think the number of food trucks that's come in even just yesterday is like close to 400, as opposed to the average of it being 70 before the war. They've been like, but that's all plausible deniability. So in order to do their genocide, they're going to do a bunch of things that you wouldn't do if you're committing genocide to make it look like they're not committing a genocide, whilst they can actually commit, basically just to kill as many people as possible without losing international support, which is such a strange like inference to make from Israeli policy. But it actually does make sense that if you believe what these guys do, because it would make it feel like just out of nowhere. It would be like if Biden was exactly the same as he is now, but he started supporting Putin. That's how these guys see it. Or if he started supporting Assad, right? But I don't know. I feel like I'm doing like the Kyle Kulinski approach to Brianna Joy-Gray, like when he was taking Brianna Joy-Gray down on her third party thing. It's just like, if you look at all the differences between the Biden administration compared to what Trump would do, like we know that Biden very, very early on in the war was the one who was on the phone for hours to Netanyahu after Israel received false intelligence that Hezbollah were actually planning an imminent attack after October 7th. I took notes from this as well. That they at the beginning, the Israeli officials actually had bad intelligence that said that Hamas was in cahoots with Hezbollah for October 7th. Like Hezbollah knew about it and they were involved in it in their own way. And also that an attack was imminent. And there were Israeli officials, I think it was Yoav Gallant especially, who was actually ready to go to war with Hezbollah. And Biden was on the phone, 3 times a day trying to convince Netanyahu and to stay that course. Now, maybe Israel would have stayed the course anyway, but we know that one of the people who was a very loud voice against that action was Biden. Whereas Trump's rhetoric for this entire war has just been, you've got to finish the war. You got to do it. You got to get it done quickly. That's been Trump's rhetoric since the beginning. Like, if Israel had gone to war with Hezbollah in October at the same time as going to war with Hamas, that would have been absolutely fucking horrible. Like, that would have been horrible for Israel and for Lebanon and Gaza. It would have been horrible for like everyone involved. And then, not to mention the fact that Biden has actually been instrumental in Israel's decisions when it comes to opening those aid corridors up in the north, and the fact that the number of aid trucks has gone from like around 70, 80, 90, 120-ish a day to the last few days where they've gone over like 200, 300, maybe even 400. So that's also been part of like Biden's very vocal stance against Israel. Biden has been the one who said that if Israel does not fulfill its international obligations, which is a legal obligation, to facilitate the passage of humanitarian aid through the Gaza Strip, especially in the north, that they would see a change in U.S. policy. And that kind of threat, I know it doesn't sound like much if you're not familiar with the history, but an American president has not spoken to an Israeli prime minister like that since 1991-92, since Bush Sr. threatened to withhold loan money in exchange for a settlement freeze. It's a big shift. The fact that there are currently policy reviews happening in the State Department over whether or not America should recognize a Palestinian state, like right now. The fact that there was the humanitarian sea corridor opened, again, all compared to Trump. Trump is saying, get the war done. He's not cautioning against going into Rafah. He's not drawing like lines. He's not being massively vocal about Rafah. He's not saying that we're going to change policy if Israel does not meet its humanitarian obligations. They're not doing that. They're like, Trump would have said, finish the war. Trump has never spoken about aid. He's just said that the war wouldn't have happened if he were president. And not even to mention what he would support outside of a war, because Trump keeps saying, let's go to peace. Well, what was Trump's peace? You just need to look at the picture. We know that Biden, in terms of a two-state solution, would back something along the lines of the Clinton parameters. That's like been the status quo for the Democrats since the 2000s. Trump, as we know, wanted to turn Palestine into this disgusting, disconnected fucking leopard print of a map. You can even notice here, Jerusalem. Trump said that he wanted to offer Jerusalem to the Palestinians, like East Jerusalem as a capital. But what he actually meant by Jerusalem was not East Jerusalem. It was a suburb on the edge of East Jerusalem, which Trump said the Palestinians could take and they could just change its name to Al-Quds. That was Trump's Palestinian capital in Jerusalem. This plan also involved a population transfer. It involved actually like an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians who live in the Triangle, Palestinian Israelis who live in places like Kfar Qasim, and getting them all just shipped over into the West Bank. This plan was horrible. It was like and again, Palestinians were never going to agree to this. This was going to be forced upon them if Trump had his way. He recognized the occupation of the Golan Heights as legitimate, the first leader in the world ever to do so, to the point that like the right-wing government, Netanyahu's government, was so happy that they built a settlement in Golan called the Trump Heights. Like, I mean, you can go on for quite a while about how pronounced these differences are, and even again, but the problem is that I don't really know why I would have. It feels so weird making the argument this way because I don't really know how you convince people who think, well, Biden's is just genocide light. I mean, you have to understand that even if you buy the genocide thing, then you have to concede that genocide happens on a massive spectrum where you've got one political leader who is quite vocal about the humanitarian situation, is drawing like certain unofficial lines, at least along limits that Israel can cross, otherwise they'll face a change in American policy. Versus like, what else did Jared Kushner said that he wanted to invest in real estate in Gaza. Like, the fuck? And even if you think that's still genocide light, well, I'm sorry. Like, there are 1.5 million people in Rafah. 1.5 million of them. And if all you see, when you see the difference between Biden, who is saying you cannot go into Rafah unless there's a humanitarian plan, unless there's a corridor for civilians to evacuate, unless there are measures taken to preserve the aid, to facilitate the aid situation in the north, you can't do it. Like, versus Trump just saying, get the war over with. There are 1.5 million people living there. And if you hear both of those scenarios, like Rafah, let's say Biden can't stop Netanyahu from attacking Rafah, but he can, let's just say he can stop Israel from doing it when there are 1.5 million people there. Let's say he can do it when they allow people to evacuate, which is already happening. People are leaving Rafah and going back to Khan Yunis. That they can do it when there are humanitarian corridors between Rafah and the other cities, when the humanitarian situation in the north is restored and a famine is averted, versus Trump's end the war as quickly as possible. If you see those two scenarios and all you think is, well, that's just two genocides, then you don't care about Palestinians. You don't. You're just grandstanding to, I guess, an audience that thinks it's principled to not vote. What up, peacetime? Oh yeah, Trump cut like over $200 million of aid to Palestinians that Biden had to restore back when he came into office. There's just so many examples. Ugh. Sorry, I was watching the video, wasn't I? Hang on. Let's see what else they're saying.
Actually, if you look at domestic policy, like, it's very clear Biden is way better on labor rights, way better on antitrust, did a few good things, but there's just a red moral line when it comes to funding a genocide over months.
See, there's this as well, because I'm sure his domestic policies are not ideal for any of these guys either. They're obviously further left than Biden is. I am. It is just the genocide line, isn't it? Because, wait, was it not Kyle? Does anyone have the clip? Did Kyle not say that what's happening in Gaza is worse than anything we've seen since World War II? Was that Kyle? Am I thinking of the right clip? Do you guys know? I feel like I watched it on stream. What note-taking application is that? He said it in the Houthi video, did he? Like the Rwandan genocide? It's just, oh God. Srebrenica, where you have like 8,000 people getting massacred, like after the fighting is completely over, post-surrender. 8,000 people killed in 2 days just to take into a fucking stadium and just shot? The fuck? Yeah, I know of Cambodia, the Iran-Iraq War. Bangladesh, that was in the 70s. Even Russia, Ukraine, don't forget that Mariupol, there is no, we don't have the body count for Mariupol because Russia won't let anyone in. We only have to guess the body count in Mariupol by going by mass graves, of which there are at least 10,000, in one city of 600,000 people pre-war. Aleppo, yeah. Assad killing like 600,000 of his own people? Fuck me. If anyone has the clip, they can show me. I don't actually remember if it was, I think it was him who said that. I'm pretty sure. 10K mass graves. No, not mass graves, just graves. I don't know if each grave is only taking one person, but the estimates right now in Mariupol are between 20 and 75,000, 25, 75,000 dead. It's just that we don't have a Ukrainian health ministry number on that because, like, we don't have an equivalent of the Gaza health ministry number on that because Russia isn't letting anyone in to count the dead. Anyway.
And months and months. And so I feel just as you do that, like, even if he did a 180 now today, it's too late. It's too late.
Mm-hmm.
And about 50% of the people who they talked to in Michigan who voted uncommitted, about 50% of them were like, he's already gone too far. That's it. I'm out. And they'll either sit out or vote for a third party candidate. But the other 50% were saying, like, yeah, if he changes it, turns it around, changes the policy, then maybe I'll vote for him. And I think this is a really difficult.
I think I don't want to downplay this. It's not really the purpose, I get, but let's see. Uncommitted vote was 13% this year, wasn't it? Whereas with Obama, it was 11%. You could argue that a lot more people voted in the one this year, but it's not like the massive exodus that some people made it out to be. The problem is that Biden doesn't just need to beat Trump, unfortunately, because of the way Trump is and the Republicans are. He needs to win by a lot. He had to win by 7 million votes in the last election, and people still thought that a few extra counted votes in different states could make the difference because of the Electoral College. Eek. Do you think if Trump wins, Israel will commit a full genocide, not discriminating between combatants and civilians? No, I don't think. Again, being indiscriminate is not genocide. Genocide is when you target a particular racial, ethnic, or national group just as a group. With the explicit intent, with the express intent of, like, exterminating them, of, like, murdering that group, either in whole or in part. And I guess the thing is that when Israel has committed massacres in the past, it never really goes like that. They've done a lot of atrocities. This is what Likud wants to do. I know you think that, Ellen DeGenerate, because you get all your opinions from the fucking internet and you have no idea what you're talking about. I know you think that, okay? Likud have had power for quite a while at various stages. They were in charge of militant groups even since 48, like Likud leaders, Menachem Begin and shit like that. They've had the ability to. They have not committed genocides, though. They've committed war crimes. Ariel Sharon committed quite a few, but that's usually the worst atrocities of Israel. They go like this. They go, there will be a command from the top, which in some cases is actually really bad. Like in Kibya, the orders from above were to dynamite the houses of terrorists, of raiders. It was to go and bring reprisals to this village that had been where raiders had come from, and as a message to dynamite the houses of terrorists. And somehow that message went down to Ariel Sharon and turned into maximum killing. So not the state, not the government actually sanctioning the act, but an order gets translated down to a crazy fucking war criminal, Sharon, and becomes like a massacre of like 60 or 70 people. That's usually how those things go with Israel. Or with the Lebanon war, the Israeli government gets cabinet approval to go into Lebanon in 82. The Israeli army gets to go into Lebanon. And as far as the cabinet knows, they're going up towards like the outside of Beirut. And on the way, they are instructed to only hit PLO people and only shoot if you're shot at first. And the reason they did that was because they knew that the Shias and the Syrians and the other people who were alongside the PLO were not helping. So they were like, okay, if we only have to fight the PLO, just for everyone else, we'll be careful, right? We'll just go with the PLO. And to the point that phase of the war, Lebanese civilians literally came out of their houses or stood in their balconies or on their rooftops and just watched the fighting. It was really bizarre. But once they get to close to Beirut, without the cabinet's knowledge initially, Sharon starts going into Lebanon. And because there is less oversight going on there. Sharon, who's a defense minister, ends up bombing pretty, like, I think maybe even indiscriminately, or like pretty like recklessly at least. And quite a lot of civilians died there. There's a lot of damage. There's a lot of like humanitarian issues. There's a lot of like displacement. It's a disaster. And then he colludes with a bunch of fucking phalangists and oversees the massacre in Sabra Shatila. But again, that's not like Sabra Shatila was not the Israeli government telling Sharon to tell phalangists to go massacre people. It wasn't that, okay? That's not how Israel goes about things ever, really. That's not how their atrocities materialize. They tend to materialize either with like a lack of orders or a lack of oversight or a kind of like a failure of like understanding orders or like rogue actors or a lack of reprisals maybe, or like a feeling like a sense of negligence, but it's never like the dolus specialis of go and exterminate this particular group. Unless anyone has a history example to prove me wrong on that, they can go for it.
Like philosophical question. I'm where you are, Anna, and I'm where you are, Krystal.
Genocide also includes ethnic cleansing. Ellen, I don't know why you're insisting on using a definition of genocide that hasn't been used since it was proposed in 1946 or whatever. The Genocide Convention since 1948 does not include moving a population. I don't know why. You're making shit up. Why are you doing this to me? Like, you're lying to me. Why? I know it's not in the definition of genocide because it was literally proposed at the beginning by Lemkin, and then the UN eventually said no to it. That was supposed to be 6 or whatever, number 6. Outside of what? Killing, serious bodily mental harm, there was on that list of 5 things. Conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction, preventing births. Yeah, one of them was transfer, and that was included in the definition of genocide, but it was taken out. It's not in the Genocide Convention. Like, fucking hell.
On this, but what I'm curious about is how I'm going to feel on election night when the results start rolling in. Because I'm like, basically, the stuff said by like the most cringe resistance liberal imaginable about Trump, I think they're right. I think he's a threat to democracy. He says stuff like, we need to terminate the Constitution or suspend the Constitution. So... And you pair that with his policy record, which was abysmal. It's just George W. Bush on steroids and war.
Lonemas, do you know why it was taken out? Yeah, because countries didn't want to implicate themselves. Thank you, by the way, Ellen, for admitting you were wrong in the first place and now trying to change the conversation. Thank you, like you always do, I guess. Yeah, thanks.
Mongering, I always find it funny when
so
people...
first of all, you said something that was wrong. I correct you, and they say, "Oh, but do you know why?" Well, I thought you said it was in the definition. Now you're making it's not the definition. Did you know all along? Why did you lie then? You could have been incorrect. That's okay.
But he was anti-war. He was not even close to anti-war. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah.
So, like, but I wonder how I'm going to feel on election night, because I agree. I'm not going to go cast a vote for somebody who's in the midst of arming and aiding and abetting a genocide. I think that's crazy. I think there are some clear moral red lines. But I'm also not going to judge people who do decide to do that, because if you look at it sort of like almost like a math problem, right? Like, let's just calculate this quantitatively. Who's done better? Then it's like with Biden, and we've made the argument a million times. You got the student loan debt reduction, the $1,400 stimulus checks. He massively reduced the drone war. He pulled out of Afghanistan. He, the Inflation Reduction Act had some good stuff in it. You guys brought up the NLRB. He's added 800,000 manufacturing jobs. You got the CHIPS Act. You got a bunch of stuff that we could point to that's a 15% corporate minimum tax.
I love this Kyle Kalinske. This Kyle Kalinski's a god. He's... The fact that he looks like Eminem with this like battle rap fucking routine of Biden's achievements. I just wish he would. I wonder if he's aware of the difference between Biden and Trump on Palestine. It's difficult when you've ascribed the worst label to Biden, aiding and abetting genocide, because if you start from there, Trump. It's hard to see Trump being any worse, even though, because you don't leave any room for anything else. Because once you're at genocide, you don't go further than genocide. Like, you've peaked. You're at peak bad. Fuck.
Tax rate, which I think is a big deal. Like, all that is good, and I'm not taking anything away from that at all. But that's why I'm saying my own, like, philosophical confusion over this. I'm curious how I'll feel on election night when the results start coming in. If it's like, it looks like Trump's going to win, I'll probably feel like fucking shit. But if it's like Biden looks like he's going to hold on, I don't know how I'll feel. Will I be like, fuck this guy too? Or will it be like...
Lonabox, so why does the EU, US believe that the forcible transfer of Ukrainian children is genocide? The transfer of children in the genocide definition is probably the most complicated one because transfer of children is in the definition, but the word destroy in the convention specifically means biological or physical destruction. So it's how can you be definitely biologically or physically destroying a group if what all you're doing is moving the kids, right? But the problem is that that's a question of precedence. Some people think you can call it genocide when it's just the moving of kids, or other people argue that the moving of kids is more of just like an indicator, but it can't be genocide in and of itself just because they're moving kids. But there's never been, as far as...
Disappointed with Kyle on this, even Maressa with Anna, at least Kyle still acknowledges the meaningful differences between Biden and Trump.
God damn, Pondering Politics, thanks for the $20. I'm glad you feel the similar way. No, moving, as far as moving kids forcibly, I don't think there's ever been a genocide case where genocide has actually been, the decision has been made based on just that. It's always involved like killing as well, and killing with the special intent of destroying the group, right? So they might say it because it's being done in conjunction with a campaign of extermination. It's more likely that they're just saying it because people don't use the word genocide in the legal way most of the time. People like that's the problem. The problem with the word genocide is that people will play fast and loose with the definition or be very tight with the definition based on where it sits in their political compass. Like that's it. That's really why, that's how people use the word genocide. That's why with the Holodomor, every tankie on Earth, every Soviet supporter on Earth will suddenly get very, very picky with legal definitions and precedent and the historical consensus and the record and the standard of dolus specialis. They're very, very academic about it. But if we come to Palestine, they've been calling it a genocide for 75 years. Like, it was a genocide when Israel wasn't even occupying Gaza and the West Bank, apparently, because of what, the counter raids, like the raids.
From leftists saying we need to stop interfering with foreign countries and start focusing on the US, then turn around and say they will support Trump because of IP?
Yes. Thanks, Dismir, for the $10. I really, really appreciate that. Thanks so much. Genocide was a historical term before it was a legal term. It can be used colloquially in reference to history. I don't think that's a term of art. I mean, if that's what you're doing, then fuck me. Like, then, okay, then yeah. So unofficially, in a sense of art, this is a shoe. I'm drinking from my shoe right now. I hope that's not why they're doing it. I thought the word genocide was coined by a lawyer. Lemkin was a lawyer, wasn't he? And he wrote Axis Rule in Occupied Europe and campaigned to have genocide a legal term. But I think historians, sometimes they will refer to cultural erasure as a genocide, even though the law technically doesn't. But at the end of the day, okay, here's my stance though. There are lots of different definitions of genocide. I will say that. Some historians just invent their own definition and then just go with that. It's really annoying. But the only one that matters is the Genocide Convention because it's the only one that's enforceable. Why the f would you appeal to any other definition? I don't really get that, unless it is just for like propaganda or whatever. But yeah, that's what people like. That's I think what most often people do is it's used. The decision whether or not to use the term is based on politics, not based on like any kind of like legal consistency. Not for everyone, but often.
Just like almost like a neutral, indifferent type feeling. I'm curious. How do you think you're gonna feel on election day? I know it's a hard question to ask because we don't know until we're there.
I don't think I'm going to feel anything, regardless of who wins. That's how much I dislike both candidates.
Golly. These are quite big creators as well. I think Krystal said she was where Anna was. Kyle didn't quite say it, did he? Kyle didn't quite... I mean, if you're an audience member, you're not voting. That's the logical... Yeah, that's the loudest message I'm getting. But Kyle didn't explicitly say he's not voting. Kyle just implied it, I think. Did he ever change his mind about the Houthis? Or does he still think the Houthis are defenders of international law and human rights? Hannah's going to be a right-wing pundit in 5 years. Ellen, you say that like, maybe not you specifically, but every time I hear someone from that crowd, the kind of like vaush-esque like crowd, you say this about everyone and you're always wrong. The only person you might even write about at one point was Dave Rubin, and probably was other people who made that observation first. And I know because my Why I Left the Left video is coming out any day now. It's coming out any day. Trust me, dude. I've made this prediction about 10 people already and been wrong every time. Ooh. How can you say that after this? The fact that she's abandoning Biden over Palestine? That's a...
Overall, when I...
If anything, this is her reintegrating with the left again. God. Bro, I just... If Trump wins and it's like oh, he loses the popular vote, but he wins the electoral college and it wouldn't have taken that many votes to keep him out. Oh my God. I will f it. I will actually... I attack leftists a lot now because I expect better from them and because I feel like I understand them better than right-wingers. If that happens and Trump gets elected, it will be out of spite. I will become a spite-driven anti-left-wing creator. I will do it. I will. I'll grab every crazy leftist on Twitter on here, and that will be my content for the next 10 years.